So, Shaun, part two of today's show, you sent me an article, and I saw it last week, and I kind of scanned through it. But you sent me an article that we were kind of talking about. What do we want to talk about this week? And what we try to do with our stuff is to not just do like, okay, here's an analysis of the running back room, which is great stuff, and we do that on the other show. But you and I try to look at things from a different angle and different perspectives. And sometimes we'll get inspiration from others. And this time it was an inspiration from ESPN, who wrote an article, and it was basically looking at the top 25 teams in the country. And it said, what is the biggest area of concern for each team? Which I thought was a very interesting thing to look at. And so they just talk about the area of concern and then they list the position. And for Notre Dame, Shaun, they have the tight end. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what they said. Do we agree with it? Do we not agree with it? What if we don't, what would be your biggest concern? If we do, why? And then also there were some other teams that we wanted to kind of point to about, hey, look, this is a good observation, or hey, I don't agree with that. And I'm really looking forward to that part of the conversation, because you and I have kind of already partly had that conversation. And so sharing with people kind of what we thoughts are, because I thought you had some great insights on one particular team that we're going to talk about. But let's begin, Shaun, with the tight end position and what they said is. So in the intro, this is what ESPN said. It says, while optimism runs high at most every college football program this time of year, even the rosiest picture has some lurking shadows. That is true even for the top 25 teams in our post-spring power rankings. No matter how deep the rosters seem, everyone has some question marks or potential weak spots, which I think is very fair. Our college football reporters take a look at the biggest areas of concern for each of the top teams, the potential Achilles heel that could keep them from reaching their goals for this season. So that's the premise, the context. And I thought overall there was a lot of okay, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Let's talk about what they said about Notre Dame. When they wrote Notre Dame, they basically talked about tight end being the problem. And what they said here's what they said. Since 2011, the Fighting Irish have had a whopping 10 tight ends selected in the NFL draft, including last season's leading receiver, Mitchell Evans, who had 43 catches for 420 yards and 3 touchdowns. While the Irish feel they've upgraded their wide receiver core with the additions of Virginia transfer Malachi Fields and Wisconsin's Will Pauling, tight end remains a bit of a question mark heading into preseason camp. Senior Eli Raridan has the size at 6'7" and hands to excel in the position, but he was plagued by injuries during his first couple of seasons after tearing an ACL as a freshman. He had 11 catches for 90 yards with 2 touchdowns since in 2024. The status of another tight end, Cooper Flanagan, who tore his left Achilles tendon in the Sugar Bowl, is in question. So, Shaun, number one, do you agree that tight end is the biggest concern for Notre Dame heading into the 2024 season? Why or why not?
I understand. That was very easy because of the numbers and the depth and the history and everything that they pointed out. I do think that we've seen Notre Dame tight ends with a history of injuries historically get things together, whether it's their junior year or their senior year, stay healthy, have productive years, and end up once again continuing that tradition of Notre Dame tight ends being drafted, right? So for that reason, I don't have as much concern about the tight end room. I know it is one key injury away from possibly being a trouble spot. But as it sits now, with Eli Raridan being the starter and the youngsters behind him that are promising, I don't have the same concern. So I myself would not say that's the most concerning thing. From a talent standpoint, I wouldn't say quarterback is a concern, but it is a concern because this is going to be a new starter, a first-time starter. That's something to look at. But what alleviates that for me is the fact that these kids have been in the system. You know what I'm saying? That right there kind of pushes that away. These are not kids that just showed up to campus. It's their first year in the system. They're trying to get to know their offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock. No, Mike Denbrock has been with these kids, these young men, knowing this day was coming. He's been knowing
why they didn't go to the portal.
Absolutely. So now it takes me to a similar position depth standpoint, as far as being unproven, and what's coming back from injury and how that's going to perform. Pass rush, edge. What's that going to look like? What is it going to be like? I know some people might have thought, man, offensive line with the injury to Charles Jackson saw that. Yeah, but you still have, 3 guys coming back that played a lot of football for you last year, played at a pretty good level before they were injured, when they were healthy, and you expect them to come back and get better. And with the recruiting there at the position, which has been really good, they should be able to sustain until the return of Charles Jackson. So that kind of alleviates that. But I am concerned about pass rush and the edge. I know we have Bryce Young. I know we have a lot of youngsters that can come in and fill in the gaps. But, Jordan Botello coming back from injury. And, oh, man, I need to see it, Brian.
Yeah.
I just really do. The promise is there. I know what's there. I know what was shown last year by both guys before the injuries.
Yeah.
But this is something else that I think pass rush along defensively, we talk about narratives. Defensive back was a narrative for a long time. But I think pass
rush. That wasn't just a narrative. That was a fact. That was a reality. Sometimes narratives are true. That one was true.
But I, at the same time, there was always concern. Like, what are you going to get as far as pass rush off the edge defensively from Notre Dame, right?
Yes.
And we thought that was being answered early, especially the way they were both playing.
And that's why that team was so good in 18 and 19.
It's
because you had legit edge rushers that could just get after the quarterback. And you could do it in waves. I remember the Cotton Bowl in 18 where Akwara, it's a second down play. Julian Akwara gets hurt. He's down. They help him off the field. So what happens on third down? They're in field goal range. What happens on third down? They bring in Adetokunbo Ogundiji on third down, and he sacks Trevor Lawrence and knocks him out of field goal range. Like, how many teams can do that? But it was like there, and then it was gone for the next couple of years. And then it was like Foskey, and then a bunch of we got to move a bunch of D tackles out to big end because we don't have anybody else. It was and the same thing in the secondary, Shaun. It was just. One year was great. The next year, it was good. It's like you went from 17, 18, and 19. Notre Dame cornerback play was really good.
Yeah.
17, it was pretty good. 18, it was elite. 19, it was pretty good. 20, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, Nick McLeod was good, but the other cornerback spot was a huge mess. The starter was a true freshman who 3 years later got processed out of the program because he was getting passed up by so many other guys. He wasn't processed out. Joe's elite. They loved Clarence Lewis as a young man, but he was getting passed up by too many guys. He processed himself out. I want to make sure I'm clear because Notre Dame did not force him out. They loved Clarence, and they appreciated everything he'd done for the program, but he just was going to be buried in the depth chart because there just was better players. That's what I mean. So it is fascinating. I'll say this, Shaun, because I've been back and forth on this one. If you said, hey Brian, I love using this analogy. It's so much fun. Hey Brian, I was able to go to the future for 5 seconds, but I only got one bit of information, and the only bit of information I got is that from now to the end of the year, there's no more major injuries, and the tight end depth chart is intact.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say tight end is not my biggest concern.
No.
And here's why I would say that, because I just have confidence that if Eli Raridan is healthy this year, he's going to be a dude. I have full confidence in that.
I agree.
If you go back and watch so if you're a board member, I'd encourage you to go check out the quarterback breakdown I did for CJ Carr. So I talk about expectations for this year. I talk about his talent. I talk about my biggest questions with him. I make a bold prediction, but then I literally took every clip from the blue gold game the last 2 years and put it into one video. So one video for the 2025 game, one video for the 2024 game. It's every throw, incompletions, picks, all of it, sacks, all of it. The one thing you noticed from watching C.J. Carr play is when Jack Larson's on the field, C.J. Carr is going to look for Jack Larson. There's just a level of confidence. And guess what? He catches it every time C.J. throws it to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just look at some of the throws he makes. It's like, okay, like Kevin Bauman makes the big play in the blue gold game. I thought they blocked well there. if they're healthy, they're fine because you're going to have Eli, who I think can be a star. I really think Eli Raritan could be a top 5 tight end in the league in college football this year, like without a doubt, like top 5. Like could end up being their most productive tight end of the last decade of anyone not named Michael Mayer. Like that's how good I think he can, because he's not going to come close to Michael Mayer's production because he's got receivers on his team, unlike what Michael Mayer was dealing with in 21 and 22. But I think he could be a stud. I think Kevin Bauman's a very nice quality backup player. I think Jack Larson can give you pass catching skills. I think Ty Washington gives you good depth.
Mm-hmm.
James Flanagan is a dude as a incoming freshman. He can help you. And then, of course, if you get Cooper Flanagan back for hopefully the last 4 games in the playoffs, that's good too.
Yeah.
The reason, and then so who would it be if that wasn't it? It's not quarterback, because I'll say what you wanted to say, but just you're trying to be nice and objective and all that kind of stuff. But here's the reality of it: I don't worry about positions where the talent is elite. I don't care about experience when the talent's elite.
Mm-hmm.
I care about experience when I don't know how good this guy's going to be. So I'll use one example to show that it's not just a Notre Dame thing. When you, Shaun, and you brought this up to me, you said the biggest question mark for Ohio State that they wrote about is quarterback. That's not my biggest concern for Ohio State. I'm not at all concerned about quarterback for Ohio State. Why? 2 reasons. One, they have a guy running the offense who's got a track record of producing talented quarterbacks in Ryan Day. You can't, no matter what you think about the guy or the fact that he dyes his beard or whatever else you may think about him, the one thing his quarterbacks produce. His worst quarterback since he took over that program, think about this. His worst quarterback was Kyle McCord. Like,
who went to Syracuse and lit it up.
Who at Ohio State still threw for over 3,000 yards, it had 9.1 yards per attempt and had 24 touchdowns. Like that's your worst quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
Julian Sayin is talented. He's surrounded by really good players.
Yeah.
And he's in a system that produces quarterbacks. You know who else produces big-time quarterbacks? Mike Denbrock. Think about who his last, 5 quarterbacks were, essentially. It was Riley Leonard, played for the title.
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner. Desmond Ridder. Deshaun Kaiser. Malik Zaire. And then he had Everett Golson. And then at Cincinnati, he had a kid in 2017 and Hayden Moore, who wasn't very good, but that was kind of like, that was year 1. And, but even then the kid went from, 1,700 yards to 25. He's had like one quarterback that wasn't great. It was his first year at Cincinnati for a team that was terrible.
Yeah.
And then the next year he goes to a redshirt freshman who goes out there and balls out in Desmond Ridder. And they go to, they go from 4-8 in the first year with Hayden Moore to the next year they go 11-2 with a redshirt freshman quarterback. So I don't care that he's a redshirt freshman. Do you know how many throws C.J. Stroud threw in 2020, the year before he took over as full-time starter? 0. Don't care. That's not a concern because why? The talent's there.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing in Notre Dame at quarterback. I'm just not. The question is, how good will they play? The other thing is there's depth. If it's not CJ, it's Kenny. If it's not Kenny, it's CJ. All right, cool. Let's roll. You're poor old Notre Dame. If the worst situation happens ever and they lose both quarterbacks, oh no, what are you going to do? You've got to put in 6'3", 225-pound athletic, big-armed Blake Hebert. How are you going to survive? It's like I'm good there. I'm good at tight end if you can promise me everyone's healthy. My biggest concern right now is defensive tackle for Notre Dame. I still don't know. Like, I know who the players are, but how are they going to play? Is Gabe Rubio going to be more consistent? Can Jason Onye stay on the team for an entire year and perform? Is Jared Dawson going to be able to do what Notre Dame would did at Louisville? Is Ardman Mukum really ready to break out? Can Donovan Heinisch keep doing what he did last year when he took over? I know Donnie did it for half the year. Can he do it for the entire year? I think so, but he's got to prove that to me. Can Elijah Hughes? He was a rotation guy on a bad D-line last year at USC. Either that was a bad coaching decision or, there's way more question marks there for me than tight end. But if I didn't have that foreknowledge of they're going to be fine health-wise, I understand why tight end's the pick. Mm-hmm. Because I do think if like to your point about defensive end, I think it's all very fair points. I don't disagree with any of it. I just feel like when you've got numbers, you're going to be all right. I mean, if they don't think about this, if they don't have, let's say Boubacar and Pataho never come back, they still have Josh Burnham, Bryce Young, Junior Chilamaka, Cole Mullins, and Logan Thomas. That's basically what they had last year when they beat Georgia and beat Penn State.
Yeah.
And beat Indiana and beat USC. That's like so you're replacing R.J. Oben who had 1 sack all year with Logan
It's
Thomas.
a pretty big sack though.
Right. No doubt. But honestly, like I think you could put Donovan Heinisch out at defensive end and give you what R.J. Oben gave you.
You probably could,
But
that goes to my point because I connected it to pass rush. Because I view this team as okay when we face. And shout out to Archer in the chat. I'm looking to get back to Ohio State.
Yeah,
like I'll take the punishment. I'm a glutton for punishment. Like you knocked us down. We coming right back.
That's the last dragon you have to slay.
That's the last dragon you have to slay. And in order to beat that, you have to have pass rush.
Have to
coming off the edge. You have to.
Yeah,
you have to. So, like you said, all of those guys that came back. Solid. Who are going to be the guys outside of the two that might return that are going to give us some type of 100% pass rush? That's why I mentioned
my point was this. I'm with you. I'm still more confident in the defensive ends than the D tackles because I know what Josh Burnham can do minimum. I know what Bryce Young can do. I know what Junior can do. I know what Logan can do. I think we'll have to see what Cole Mullins can do. That's a question mark. And then you've got obviously like Chris Burgess coming in. But I don't know that any of these D tackles can be the guy. That's a bigger question for me. But the reason tight end.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah.
Especially when you say the guy. Like who can be the guy.
Right.
It was very apparent that Riley Mills was the guy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The reason tight end I'm sympathetic to that still being the pick is because I do fear that if Eli Raridon goes down, there's a much bigger drop off there than there is at defensive end if Boubacar never comes back or back.
Yeah.
Or at quarterback if CJ goes down, or if Kenny's your starter if Kenny goes down, or like to me that's where tight end becomes a concern is if everybody's healthy, I have no question about tight end. But think about the depth chart. Your number one guy has missed parts of 2 seasons with injuries. Tore his ACL as a senior in high school. Your number 2 guy is going to his 6th year because he's literally had 4 different seasons where he's missed time with injuries. You have your who would have been your number 2 guy is going to be out for a long time with an Achilles that he hurt against Indiana, which means there's a chance he may not be back until November, December, January time again, potentially. Your number 4 guy, Ty Washington, is a guy that's had his own injury issues and then also got kind of removed from his team at Arkansas last year. Like there's literally not a guy in the top 4 that's played any snap of college football, meaningful snap, because they've all 4 played meaningful downs of college football. They've all missed games for large chunks of games for one reason or another, except who? Cooper Flanagan, who is about to miss a bunch of chunk of games because he already got hurt. And he missed the last 3 playoff games, which I would consider, you could consider a large chunk of games. I'm saying even more than that. The only guy that hasn't missed games because of injury is the redshirt freshman Jack Larson, who's never played a meaningful down. And your true freshman James Flanagan, who's never played a meaningful down. So that's why my concern is I know a lot more about the DNs if Boubacar and Botelho don't come back than I do about the tight ends if Eli Raridon gets hurt.
Oh, absolutely.
That's really where I'm sympathetic.
That's definitely fair.
I don't know that I'd go tight end because I don't think you can assume an injury.
Right.
But it's the injury history that makes me say I understand where they're coming from on the tight end pick. I really do.
Oh, I definitely understand.
At first, he would go D tackle.
Yeah.
But I would go, I think tight end, I understand. It's not like, oh my God, are you guys nuts? That is not the biggest concern for Notre Dame. Are you? No, I don't. I'm not gonna push back too hard on that at all. Even though I'd pick another position. There's others where I'm like, that's your biggest concern for that team? Like, okay. So,
is it fair to say Chris Ash is a concern if you expanded it?
Yeah, it is. Like when I went through their rankings or I went through the different things, I didn't see anything on there
about coaching.
Yeah, I mean, they would say like, stopping big plays, defense as a whole, explosive plays. Like there's things like that they talk about, but I didn't see anything in there that was like like Matt Patricia's adjustment to the college game is very similar for Ohio State that I would bring up that you and I talked about on the phone is similar to Chris Ash. But that's a bigger picture concern for me, no question, is how will he adapt? How will he use the talent? All those types of things.
Now, it's funny how the biggest concern for Notre Dame and the biggest concern for Miami ends up being connected. Because if Miami's biggest concern is the linebacker play, that from the run game, and we see how Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl felt like the linebackers at Penn State can be taken advantage of in the passing game. So now you look at, bettors out there, hey, maybe you look at Eli Raridon having a big first game.
Yes.
Speaking to your point.
Like we said, Shaun, is if Eli Raridon's healthy, I have zero concerns about tight end. I don't. And when you look at CJ Carr, who I do expect to be the starting quarterback, he has to earn it, but I've never hidden the fact that I think he's going to win the job. I've simply said, I just don't care if Kenny does. I mean, if Kenny does, I'm fine with that too. If you ask my opinion, I think CJ is going to win it. You look at those two games and break them all down. He had no problem throwing to the tight end. He threw to the tight ends a lot. And this is something we've talked about. And Kenny does as well. There wasn't as much called for tight ends with Kenny in if you watch him, but he had no problem throwing to the tight ends when those opportunities were there either. And was it Kenny that threw the screen pass to Eli during the Blue Jersey scrimmage? Or was it Steve? I thought it was
Steve. I thought that was Steve.
Steve? Okay.
I thought that was Steve.
So it was Kenny that threw the seam to Jack Larson that I thought Jack should have caught. So I don't have any concerns about the quarterbacks throwing to the tight ends. I think they're going to throw to the tight ends a lot. It's just about can Eli stay healthy? That's the only question mark. If you told me you looked in the future and the only thing you were able to gather from your 10 seconds in the future was that the tight ends, the team and the tight ends stay healthy the rest of the year, I'm not worried about tight end. I'm not, because now everybody else can fall into their role.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin Bauman's a nice number 2-3 guy. Ty Washington's a nice number 2-3 guy. Jack Larson can help you in a niche. James Lanigan can absolutely come in and block for you as a freshman, and maybe then develop into a pass catcher also. I mean that's a top 100 talent. So I mean there's talent there, and then eventually hopefully you get Cooper Flanagan back to block for you when you get the playoffs or something. But it's just the injury history. The entire depth chart of anyone that's played a meaningful down is just riddled with injuries and issues that kept them off the field. That's my concern. But barring that, barring projecting injury, I'd go D tackle. I'm not worried about safety. Number one, Mike Mickens has kind of found a track record of, okay, you lose one guy, you develop another. I mean, you lose DJ Brown, Ramon Henderson, and Adon Schuler's better than they were. You lose Kyle Hamilton, and what do you replace him with? Xavier Watts. The track record's there for Mike Mickens to say, hey, I think they're going to be fine there. And the talent's really good.
Man, you say that again.
Really good.
Really good. There's
a shot that one of Bronte Johnson or Jadon Blair is going to be third team. Or Luke Tallis is going to be third team. Actually, it's not even a shot. One of them is going to have to be.
One of them will be. Yeah.
It's just a fact. I was on Bill King's show the other day, and he was asking me about Kennedy Ehrlich. I was like, look, you're not going to hear me saying he wasn't good enough to play at Notre Dame. That's why he left. No, he could play for Notre Dame. It's just he was buried on an incredibly deep depth chart. He's going to help USC a lot, in my opinion. That was a good pickup for them. But think about that. That was a really good pickup for USC. But that was a kid who had no shot at sniffing the field for Notre Dame this year at safety.
Yeah.
I'm just not worried about that. And that's where, I'm not worried about receiver. I'm not worried about running back. I'm not worried about O-line. I mean, you lose Charles Jagasol. Oh, how are you going to survive having to put Sullivan Absher in the game? There's a lot of teams who will be like, wait, hold on a second. You lose your most talented guy and you replace him with Sullivan Absher? That's not fair. You know what I mean? We're losing guys. I tried to make this point one time when somebody was on one of those, when you bring up the point that okay, yeah, Notre Dame did a lot of good things against Oregon State, but Oregon State was missing half the team. Well, Notre Dame didn't have Joe Walt. I'm like, guys, Notre Dame loses Joe Walt. They replace him with Charles Jagasol. They lose Blake Fisher and replace him with Tosh Baker. They lose Cam Hart and they're replacing him with who was it they replaced? It was Christian Gray. They're okay. It's you lose Maris Leofau and you're replacing him with what? It was I think they put in Jalen Sneed. Oregon State's not replacing their starting tackle with a Charles Jagasol. That's the difference, but that's where Notre Dame is. You lose a guy like Charles Jagasol, and you're like you're upset about it, but it's like, okay, I'm pissed about it that they're not going to have him, but it's like, but they're going to be okay because it's either going to be Sullivan Absher or Chris Tarrick or Joe Otting or Will Black or Styles Prescott or Gerby Lambert. Like, that's who you're choosing from to replace Charles Jagasol. I think you're going to be okay, And a lot of places I feel like that. Tight end, I don't feel like that. If they lose their starter, I think there's a significant drop off. There just is. And if you lose Boubacar again, you still got a bunch of dudes. You still got Bryce Young, you still got Josh Burnham, you still got Junior Chilamaka, you still got Logan Thomas, you still got Cole Mullins, you still got maybe Patelho. It's a little different at tight end. So that's why I'm sympathetic to that argument. Is there any other positions that you would consider? Like, did you consider receiver at all? I know some people will consider receiver because they got to see it, but I honestly just don't. I just think there's so many good weapons that I just
I think receiver and quarterback go hand in hand for me. I think when you see increased talent, I think that's going to help both perform at a higher level than we've seen recently at Notre Dame. So that's not a concern for me. And I think it kind of plays into, the concern I had for another team that's in the top 5 that has wide receiver concerns that they went to the portal to solve. But my biggest issue is what you talked about, the talent at quarterback. Like, right. you have elite talent. We think there's elite talent in the quarterback room in Notre Dame.
Both guys,
right?
Yes.
I just don't think, I don't think Penn State has an elite signal caller.
Let's real quick wrap up Notre Dame. Anything else to add about Notre Dame? Because I want to get into these next guys. Because I think we've kind of
covered Notre Dame. Yeah, we
covered Notre Dame. We covered that. Let's go through the list and look at some of these other schools and dive into it. And we'll start with Penn State, Shaun, because they're the number 1 team.
Yeah.
And they're the preseason number 1 team. They listed wide receivers the number 1 position. And you brought this up to me. You don't think it's wide receiver. Well, let's talk about it, because I think that's an interesting take.
Because I think anytime you have team composition, everybody's created different. And so if you do not have that guy, you have to recognize we don't have that guy. I'll give you a perfect example. I think Clemson felt like they had a guy similar to what they've had previously. And I think they realized that Cade Klubnik needs a little bit of help. And we need to get a little bit more explosive on the outside. We need to add some more playmakers on the outside. We need to get a little bit better on the offensive line. And I think they've done that. And I think you saw Cade Klubnik, when he started to feel comfortable with that, you saw his play progress because he has the ability to make plays with his legs outside of the structure of a quarterback in the pocket. And I think now you look forward to his senior year because you feel like, okay, maybe he has a chance. I just don't, first of all, physically, I don't see that for Drew Allen. I don't see him being able to make those plays that are outside the structure of what a quarterback is asked to do. That's number 1, just physically. Some people think he has a big arm. I'm not one of those guys that think he has a big arm.
I do think he has a big arm. I think but it's limited to the downfield throws because he's got a long windup.
See that right there?
Right.
That goes into my thinking about having a big arm. It's like,
he's not going to quickly zip off a 15-yard comeback off his back foot.
No.
He needs a windup.
He needs a windup.
He
absolutely
puts heat on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for that, you can go and get all the wide receivers you want. And the wide receivers they went and got, those are not wide receivers that are really going to stretch the field, scare defenses. Dependable, one of the guys, Notre Dame played when they faced USC at the end of the year.
Yeah, Kyron Hudson.
Kyron Hudson is a solid possession type receiver, good with the ball in his hand.
The biggest play he made this year. So it was a phenomenal one-handed catch against LSU in the opener.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that's torching people, stretching the field. Like, he's not replacing Amari Evans, what Amari Evans brought to that offense.
No.
Who was an inconsistent player, but he could stretch the field now.
Yeah. But long story short, I think the quarterback Drew Aller I think he limits what you can do offensively. Me, he's not he doesn't elevate the players around him. He needs talent around him to help him play efficiently and better at the position. So my concern for them to be the best team, he has to elevate his game. And I don't know if he has the capabilities to do that, because I don't think it's about, I think he's going to have to make plays outside the structure of what they're asking him. I love Kolenick. Man, very impressed with how he came in and allowed him, Drew Aller, to take steps forward. I do think he became a better quarterback under Andy Kolenicki. I love the play calling, all of that. Love the run game. Love the way they use the run game. But they have a history of great tight ends. So I think the next
Luke
tight
Reynolds
end is
very talented.
Yes,
he's not going to catch 100 passes for 1,200 yards again.
No.
They're not going to, but they're
going to have tight end.
That's not
production.
a weakness.
Absolutely.
Tight end. It's just going to look more like normal people tight end, good tight end.
Both of us like their offensive line last year.
Yeah, and it's going to be healthier because they get the tackle they got.
Absolutely. Back. So you go to the defensive side of the ball. They're always finding linebackers. They're always finding the next pass rusher.
Yes,
coming off the
denied
edge.
Dennis Sutton is like, okay, that's you lose Abdul Carter, you still got denied Dennis Sutton. I think the biggest loss they had was losing Vanover to the portal. Not, I'm saying you knew you were losing Carter. Like he was gone. You were going to lose Carter. That was but you thought you were going to have Vanover to replace him, and then he jumps in the portal, and that's going to be interesting. But again, you got denied Dennis Sutton. You're going to be good there.
Yeah. But I just think it's interesting. I think from the standpoint of they're looking at it production wise, narrative. I get why you go to wide receiver, but for me, with what that roster is, that's a talented roster. It was a talented roster last year. It was a roster that was good enough to beat Notre Dame. It had a good chance to beat Notre Dame and had played Ohio State very closely. And if they had faced Ohio State again, because they had the edge rushers, they probably would have had a chance.
Right.
In that national championship
game.
They were
close to Ohio State each of the last 2 years they played.
Absolutely. So this is a talented roster. They've done a great job recruiting and building depth. I don't know if they just have that guy. I don't know if they have that guy at quarterback that can get it done at the biggest moments. Because when all was said and done, he made the mistake. He made the biggest mistake.
Well, he couldn't make the plays against Ohio State either.
Yeah.
Or Oregon. He made some big plays, but there's also some mistakes he made,
So that for me, that is the biggest question for me as far as them being able to get over the hump and actually be the best team as they're ranked preseason.
Yeah.
For them to be able to do that, he's the biggest question, right? Because they were able, without those wide receivers having one single reception, they were that close to getting to the national championship game. With a wide receiving core that had 0 receptions. That's just
partly due to Drew, but also partly due to the fact that they played the best secondary.
They played the best defensive back. Yeah.
It's Drew Aller's a very interesting player because I've had debates with people where I've defended Drew Aller and debates with people where I've actually had to kind of like push back on, okay, you're giving him too much credit. And because there seems to be kind of two camps with Drew Aller. One is he sucks, he's terrible, he's overrated. And the other is he's a potential top 5 overall NFL draft pick. And I'm like, neither of those things are true. Now, could he maybe develop into that? Of course he could, but needs some work, but he's not a bum either like people make him out to be. And that's the frustration with the conversation with Drew Aller is that I feel like there's just these two extremes with him. I think Drew Aller's a good college quarterback. I don't think that Penn State's any better last year if Cade Klubnik's their quarterback. I would argue that actually somebody said this. I forget what the way it's phrased is. Would Penn State be better if they had Cade Klubnik? And I was like, I don't know. Maybe. And I've kind of thought about this. I'm like, actually, I thought about it. I actually think that Penn State would be better with Cade Klubnik a quarterback because they'd have a guy that can make plays with his legs. But you know what? I think Clemson might be better because they have that big-armed quarterback that can now get the ball. Let me rephrase. I think Drew Aller would be better at Clemson Dean is better at Penn State. I don't know that they'd be better without Cade Klubnik, but he'd be better because he could just drop back and throw the ball to those big, long, vertical receivers who like to run downfield. I think he'd be better suited in that because I think the issue that I have at receiver, and the reason that I tend to agree with you is I don't know that, like, I think on paper, Penn State went and did a really nice job upgrading at wide receiver. Like, no doubt about it. Trevor Ross is a really good player. Actually, I think I got it's not Trevor Ross. What is his? Devontae Ross, excuse me. It's Trevor Pena. Devontae Ross, who was 1,000-yarder at Troy last year. And then, of course, you got Kyron Hudson. And they've got a couple young guys coming back. And then you got Luke Reynolds at tight end. The backup kid is a Dinkins at tight end that caught a pass against Notre Dame last year. Caught two, actually, I think, against Notre Dame last year. Nicholas Singleton's one of the better pass-catching running backs in college football. What's funny is he's not even the best in his state. That's Desmond Reed, but he's top 3 or 4 overall because Desmond Reed's a dude out of the backfield. You got plenty of weapons. Here's my issue, though, Shaun. Do they fit Drew Aller's talent? They fit Andy Kolonicki's system, but do they fit Drew Aller's talent? That's my concern. Do you know the perfect offense for Drew Aller would be? Lloyd Carr's Michigan teams. Run downhill, throw downhill. Drop back, throw bombs. He's that tall, long levers quarterback that Michigan used to have every year. You know, it was Todd Collins and Elvis Gerback, and who's the big tall guy they had that looked like a tight end? Oh man, you know what I'm talking about. Oh man, I'm gonna have to draw this up, but it's like Michigan every year. Tom Brady was an
Jeremy
example.
Tooman, not Tooman.
No, he was a tight end for them, but like every year, I thought his first name was like John Navarre. That's who it was. Okay. But like he was like.
I thought you were talking about the tight end. You were talking about the quarterback.
No. He looked like a tight end. John Navarre was like 6'7", and he was like this big old joker. But they had these long-armed, like long levers, just throw bombs to Ty Streets or Amani Toomer, whoever, Braylon Edwards, and all those guys. And with Kolonicki's system, it's like it's quick game, it's quick releases, it's quick decisions, it's throwing off platform. And I don't know that that's really Drew's game. And that's why I felt like he'd be better served in a different offense. And that's why I think you can make the case that quarterback is the concern, because I think they upgraded their receiving core. And you're not saying they didn't. What I would say, and this is something you and I talked about on the phone, I think the receivers were an issue because of Drew at times, because he was a guy, because he's a long lever guy, he's not someone that's going to, and he doesn't make really fast decisions. He's not a great processor. He's not a guy that's going to bang that comeback route low and away out of the break where you're playing and the ball's getting ready to leave his hand. That's not Drew. That's not Drew Aller. And that's what the receivers needed last year. They needed a quick decision maker and an accurate guy. And I think they got better versions of what they had last year. But look, Lane Kiffin, Shaun, who knows the thing about receivers, thought enough of Harrison Wallace to go get him out of the portal this year. So, how bad is he? I think didn't Washington get Amari Evans? I think Washington got the Evans kid. But I feel like the receivers kind of, Keandre Lambert-Smith is another example. The kid that had some frustrations and at Penn State the year before, didn't do a whole lot at Penn State the year before. Shaun, let me look up his stats here real quick. But in 2023, Keandre Lambert-Smith for Penn State caught 53 passes for 673 yards and 4 touchdowns. Nice player, and 24 for 389 the year before that. And there was some frustration with him. He had some frustrations. He goes to Ole Miss last year. And at Ole Miss last year, he catches 50 passes for 981 yards and 8 touchdowns. He went from 12.7 yards per catch in 2023 with Drew to 19.6 yards per catch with Jackson Dart. And that's kind of where I'm coming from, is like you got to get guys that fit your system, but your system has to also fit your quarterback. And that is a concern I have. Is I think Drew is a talented player, but Drew's got to be in the right system, and I don't know that Drew's in the right system. He would have been like a great quarterback under David Shaw. Like David Shaw could have done some
that's a good
things with
call.
Drew Aller.
That's a good
With
call.
the corners and the posts and the digs and the play action and just the longer developing stuff. He could run that spider 2 wide banana like a champ. He's not the read. David Shaw was really good at simplifying the reads when he had a quarterback that was inexperienced or wasn't real smart. And that's my concern with Drew. I think he's a talented quarterback. I just wonder if he's got the processing ability and the arm type, not arm strength, arm type to fit in that system. I thought Clemson running back was a spot on. Texas offensive line, I thought was spot on. Georgia pass rush. I don't know that that's a concern of mine. Georgia's never been a team that really cared a whole lot about the pass rush. Kirby's system is not, hey, let's generate a bunch of sacks. It's just not that kind of system. I still think their secondary is a big concern, and I still think their receivers are still a big concern. And I think their offensive line is still a bigger concern.
Their structure is very much interior defensive line, funnel things to our linebackers.
Yeah.
Right. So now the defensive ends are not, it's almost like they're not coached to just come straight uphill and get after the quarter. They will in obvious passing situations. Like they played Texas, you could tell they took them off the leash against Texas because they were coming like, we're not even worried about this run game.
Oh, yeah.
We're going after Quinn Ewers and we're going to rattle them early.
If you look at it, they had 37 sacks last year, Shaun. The only year they had more than that in the last decade was 2021, when they had one of the best defenses of the last 20 years. They had 49 sacks that year in 15 games. This year they had 37 in 14 games. But, I mean, you look at it the year before in 14 games, they had 30 sacks. The year before that in 15 games, they had 35 sacks. In 2020, 10 games doesn't really count. 2019 in 14 games, they had 31 sacks. In 2018 in 14 games, they had 24 sacks. So that's just not what Kirby's defense. If they can get after the quarterback, that's great. But it's not like Penn State's defense where it's geared towards pressuring the quarterback. It just isn't. So I don't know that that's a bigger concern. What they always had though, Shaun, is they had a secondary that played very tight coverage.
True.
And linebackers that could fly.
Mm-hmm.
And they have linebackers they still have linebackers that can fly. Like their linebacking core, CJ Allen's a very good player, and it's a very good depth chart.
And that was one of the things you pointed out. I want to say that maybe 2 of the last 3 years, their linebacking core wasn't as athletic as
before this past year. Yeah.
Before this past year. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But their secondary especially wasn't as good as athletic last year as it has been. Daniel Harris is not like what they had at corner.
No.
But like last year, Shaun, in 14 games, if you look at Pro Football Focus numbers, last year in 14 games, Georgia had 244 pressures and 73 sacks plus hits on the quarterback. The year before that, they had 222 and 57 sacks plus hits on the quarterback. And so, like, they were actually a lot better getting after the quarterback last year than they were in previous years, in my opinion. I mean, they had 78 sacks plus hits on the quarterback in 2022 when they won the national championship and played 15 games. So I don't think that's their concern. I think they don't cover as well as they used to. And yes, Dalen Everett has a chance to be really good, but he's going to have to get a lot better than he was last year. They've got to find somebody who can beat out Daniel Harris. They just do. They've got to find somebody who can beat him out. I think KJ Bolden at safety is going to be very good. But the Dan Jackson kid was a very underrated player for them last year. They lose him as well. I think their biggest concern on defense, pass rush is even my biggest concern on defense. I don't think the overall talent of the D-line is as good as it's been, but that's just not what Kirby Smart has ever really been about. Like if they pressure the quarterback, that's great, but it's not what their emphasis is on. So I have to go with some other positions there. But like last year, yeah, everybody talks about Dalen Everett. I'm seeing like preseason, love for him as an All-American player and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, I got to listen to Notre Dame fans complain about Christian Gray. And I'm like, and last year, Christian Gray held opponents to a 58.8% completion rate. Dalen Everett gave up a 68.2% completion rate. Christian Gray gave up 40 catches on 68 targets. Dalen Everett gave up 45 catches on 66 targets. He gave up 3 touchdowns last year. Christian Gray gave up 4 in one more game. Dalen Everett had 3. This according to Pro Football Focus had 3 picks and 3 breakups. Christian Gray had 3 picks and 7 breakups. So it's like, I mean, his numbers were better than Dalen Everett's, and Dalen Everett's getting all this preseason All-American talk because he's at Georgia. And so I think their secondary is still the bigger concern for them on defense.
I would agree with that.
I think receiver's a bigger question mark for them.
Yeah.
And offensive line, just stay healthy and they should be okay. But I think their ability secondary is still a bigger concern. I think Clemson, if you were going to say it's not running back, I still think their secondary is a big concern. Yes, I know that they've got Avion Terrell, who's individually a really good player. But just because you're individually a really good player, I mean, Notre Dame had Kyle Hamilton in 2020. No one's sitting there saying like Notre Dame had the best secondary in college football. So I think that's a big concern for me. Ohio State quarterback we talked about. LSU offensive line, spot on. I mean, that's going to define their season, how good their offensive line could be. Georgia defensive line. I still think secondary's a question mark I think that's still a bigger question mark because they got DJ's younger brother, Mateo, who's a really good player. They got some young guys. I mean, I'm not a big Bear Alexander fan. I think they got plenty of defensive linemen. I think their secondary's the bigger concern. I think there's people just assuming Dylan Theinemann's just going to step in and be a star. I didn't think he was a star at Purdue.
Yeah.
You can blame he played on a bad team. Okay, that's fine. I mean, bad team doesn't have any reason why he can't make tackles against Notre Dame. So
probably still sees JD in his sleep.
100%. Jadarian Price wakes up from nightmares shouting Jadarian Price's name. Yeah. I think that's a bigger concern for me. Alabama also pass rush. Again, I don't know that they're a 3-3 team. I don't know that that's the goal of what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I think if you tally them up, I think pass rush and defensive end were like predominantly one of the biggest question marks. I think this is what was amazing to me. People had questions about quarterbacks at schools that have coaches that have a history of developing quarterbacks. It was the weirdest thing looking at this. Like, you got to question the quarterback at Ole Miss?
Right.
Really?
Yes. Like, do we need to go back and pop in that old Georgia game and watch what Austin Simmons did? The drive after Jackson Dart gets hurt? Like Shaun, they're going to be fine at quarterback. The only team that they had quarterback on there that I thought was legitimate was BYU. Because obviously when you lose who you thought was going to be your starter, that's a big concern.
But even their recent run of quarterbacks has been pretty decent.
I didn't think the kid they had was that good. I wasn't a big fan of Jake Resliff.
Even though he was one of those moxie kids.
Gamer, yeah.
Yeah,
it was okay. Illinois, offensive explosiveness. I think that's fair.
Oh, but they lost to Franklin and Bryant.
I do like that kid they got from West Virginia, though, Shaun.
Oh, yeah.
He's a good player.
He's a good player. They got a couple of incoming freshmen. I think they did a great job talking to Barry Lundy Jr., the offensive coordinator, and he talked about, having a little bit more speed, top end speed on the outside now. But I think he's done a great job developing Altmaier. He really has. He's brought him along, and you could tell he's become
another former Ole Miss quarterback.
Yep. So that they're going to lean on that run game, the veteran offensive line they do have, and they have enough at the running back that Josh McCray, who had a great game in the bowl game against South Carolina, said, "No, I'm going to Georgia. I don't want to come back. I'm gonna go ahead and go jump in the Georgia backfield."
I was not a fan of that. I was definitely not a fan of that.
Yeah.
Arizona State, Shaun, they said pass rush. I think that's fair. I'm fine with that. They need to be, that hurt them a little bit at times against Texas. They need to be able to get after the quarterback a little bit more. Here's one that I thought was interesting. South Carolina, they put defensive front. What? Like Dylan Stewart's presence alone makes that not their biggest question mark. like it's not great, but like you're acting like this team is so loaded everywhere else that your only concern is a position where they have Dylan Stewart. Like, I'm not sure I feel you on that one, Shaun. I'm gonna have to say I don't agree with that one. I think linebacker, secondary, I think are bigger question marks at that position, and I think the receivers still have a lot to prove.
Maybe it's an overreaction to what they lost via the draft and the portal, and you just never know. The guys. It's a collection of guys that they went to get these reports and these opinions.
Yeah,
but that's very interesting because once again, that's a school.
Yeah.
That's a school going back to Georgia. Georgia is smack dab in the middle of like big man heaven from a recruiting standpoint. And even if you don't hear about certain guys in their recruiting class, they got some biggins, as they say, waiting in the offense to come in and be developed. So like South Carolina, that's one thing they have had. They've been able to get really good players on the defensive line. Yes. So that is puzzling. It's puzzling.
Especially when you talk about they lost their two deep linebackers they lost. Bam Martin Scott and Demetrius Knight are both gone. I'm pretty sure they're both gone. Those guys combined for 17 tackles for loss last year, linebacker. And it's like, okay, I know they lost some guys. Like you said, they lost Kyle Kennard, they lost TJ Sanders, but like they still have plenty of players coming back. They got Brian Thomas coming back, who had 6.5 sacks last year. They had Dylan Stewart coming back, 10.5 sacks last year. If Notre Dame was coming back this year with one edge who had 10.5 sacks and another guy with 6.5 sacks, we'd be talking about like this is going to be a monster strength. Like, no, y'all act like that's their weakness. Like their roster's so loaded that they're just, come on, man. Like secondary is a bigger concern for me. Receiver still has to prove that the talent is as good as the reputation. I mean, their top three receivers this year, last year caught 26 passes for 376 yards and 3 touchdowns, 30 catches for 337 yards and 3 touchdowns, and 15 catches for 244 yards and a touchdown. That's what their top 3 receivers did last year. Look, I get Nick Harbor's a phenomenal track guy, but he has to kind of prove that he can be a good football player. So I think that's a bigger question mark for me. I think their D-line is going to be fine. I think their D-line is going to actually be pretty good. So we'll see how that goes. And I think running back, they're replacing, Rocket Sanders with a couple portal guys. I think that's a bigger question mark than D-line. So it is what it is. Iowa State, wide receiver. So hold on a second. Losing 2,000-yard receivers is a problem for Iowa State? Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's fair. Teams like Iowa State, it's hard to replace a couple 1,000-yard receivers. And those guys were like legit. They were both, I think, third-round draft picks. So, like, they were both good football players. They weren't just, like, system guys. SMU D-line. What's funny is SMU's defense had been pretty good the last few years, but they lost a lot. They lost a lot from their top group. Texas Tech defense, they just went vague with that. Defense.
No, that's spot on. That's spot on.
Yeah, okay, nailed everywhere. That. But they did the same thing for the next team, Indiana defense.
Yeah.
What? Did you watch this team at all last year?
No, they didn't.
Like, yeah, Ohio State whooped them in. They scored 34 and 27 points against them, respectively.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
Like, defense is the biggest. Not O-line, not new court. Defense, the whole defense for a team that was a top 10 defense last year, that's your big concern. Okay. Like, I didn't know Indiana was that loaded, Shaun, where their defense is their problem. Because if their defense is a problem, I mean, dude.
And they did a great job in the portal.
Yes. They gave up 15.6 points per game, 256.3 yards per game, 4.3 yards per play. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize Indiana was the best team in the state. It just hit me. Since the defense is their biggest concern, come on, man. And look, let's not forget that I believe in the game against Ohio State where they gave up, 38 points, believe that Ohio State had a punt return for a touchdown in that game as well, correct? Yeah. And I believe Ohio State also had another drive that went less than 10 yards. I believe. I'm looking up the box score now. But, yeah, you had Caleb Downs had a punt return in that game. And then Ohio State had a touchdown drive of 44 yards. They had a touchdown drive of 7 yards. Ohio State had a punt return for a touchdown. They had a touchdown drive of 40 yards, a field goal drive of 43 yards. Ohio State had one drive of over 45 yards in which they scored. The reason Ohio State dominated Indiana is because Ohio State's defense dominated Indiana's offense. Indiana's defense held their own against Ohio State in that game, in my opinion. And so I look at that, I'm like, okay. I mean, Ohio State rushed for $115. Will Howard threw for 201 yards. That's a good day's work, but that's not elite. They lost the game because their quarterback passed for 68 and they rushed for 85.
Yeah.
That defense is not the problem. And let's be honest, outside of a 98-yard touchdown run to Jeremiah Love and then a big play to Jordan Faison, their defense held their own against Notre Dame as well. Like, I don't know what you were watching last year, but Indiana has some things they need to get better at. Defense is you get Mikhail Kamara comes back. You got Aiden Fisher comes back. D'Angelo Pons comes back. They're one of their best safeties come back. I mean, what? I mean, wow. That's one that I got to kind of scratch my head and say, Indiana has some things they got to get better at, Shaun. That ain't one of them.
Yeah, I was shocked. I was shocked to see defense. Shocked. Not one particular position, just
the entire defense. Yes. It's like, okay, that's an interesting take. Kansas State, it said stopping big plays. Okay, I mean, Bill Connelly said that, so, he's got the analytics and all that. I mean, they weren't great at that. I still think their O-line is their biggest concern. Shaun, that here's something that people don't realize about Kansas State. That's one of the most athletic offensive skill teams you're going to find in college football this year. That team, I mean, you talk about Avery Johnson is one of the most athletic quarterbacks. Dylan Edwards is one of the most explosive running backs. And J.C. Brown is an absolutely explosive wide receiver. But can they protect and open up holes? That's my big question. Like, their offensive line, to me, is going to determine how good this team is going to be this year. Not their, they got to get better there, but that's not my biggest area of concern. Yeah, it's not. Same with Florida. They have wide receiver at Florida. I view wide receiver being the biggest concern in the same way that I view Notre Dame's tight ends being the biggest concern. I actually think this is fair. I didn't take their comments to mean that they don't think they have talent there. They said a lot of the same things they said about Notre Dame. Their top three receivers all have injury issues. Eugene Wilson, they all had injury issues. They're bringing in J. Michael Sturdivant, who struggled to stay healthy. Very talented. If you could tell me that Florida's going to be healthy this season, receiver is not even in my top three of concerns for Florida. But in the same way that I appreciate the point they're making about Notre Dame, it's not that they don't have talent, it's the health, the proven health of the room. I think that's a fair point. If everybody's healthy, I think Florida's got bigger concerns. I think that running back is a bigger concern than I mean, they're good there, but then receiver, if everybody's healthy. Their O-line's pretty good. I think their D-line should be pretty good. Linebackers should be. Secondary is probably a bigger concern for me just because similar injury health issues. But if they're healthy, I think Florida's going to have a very good receiving core if they're healthy. That's a big question mark.
I like the J. Michael. I like the Sturdivant addition. I like that addition.
Well, because what they have is they have a lot of guys that are like short and quick and athletic. Yeah. Eugene Wilson's that way.
Eugene Wilson was having a great season.
Yeah.
Great season before the injury.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, no question about it. I think what J. Michael brings is, and this is true for Dallas Wilson as well. Eugene Wilson is the guy that's short and quick. Some of the other guys were short and quick. Kid from Wisconsin was kind of that way.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have anybody that was like that long stretch the field kind of guy. And I think with Dallas Wilson, he's that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I think J. Michael Sturdivant is that kind of guy. And I think for DJ Lagway, with his arm strength, they need that. And so I think but again, that's a true freshman and a bunch of guys coming off injuries. So I get it. I think it's a fair assessment of that team. Michigan wide receiver, that's one of the biggest no-brainers on here. Like,
duh.
You could, if it's last year's team, it's quarterback. As
Yeah.
bad as they were receiver, quarterback was even worse. But
Yeah.
Mike Keene is way better than what they had last year, and they still beat Ohio State and Alabama with that quarterback. Receivers by far the biggest concern they have. Miami linebacker, I think Miami's secondary is still the biggest concern. Look, putting a bunch of 5 brand new guys together in a system where everybody's kind of got to work together.
With
like
a new
receiver, it's like
coordinator, yeah,
like, okay, receiver, you just kind of got to know your job. You have to understand your job. It's good that you know everything, but you just kind of know your job. There's not a lot of communication between receivers that's needed. Secondary, you absolutely have to have communication every snap. And you got a bunch 5 new guys playing together. That's Miami's biggest concern. I mean, linebacker's a question mark, but it's going to be solid. My question with linebackers, how good is it going to be? I like Raul Guire. They bring back another linebacker to play a lot. Yeah, I know Francisco Mauanoa was a really good player, but I think they're going to be at least solid there. I'm much more concerned. If I'm a Miami fan, I'd be much more concerned about the secondary than I would.
That's fair, because I remember, if you remember, the first practices that fall or that spring when Al Golden arrived. And I'm sitting there, and Al Golden is standing right behind the safeties like the entire practice. The entire practice. And he's screaming before every snap, communicate. He's not even concerned about what happens. He's just communicate, because he understood communication from that position and in the secondary was so vital to what he was trying to build and get them to understand. Right. And you could tell they talked about that, at every level.
Yeah.
Like he talked about his linebackers having to be able to be trusted.
Right.
Not just post snap, but pre-snap. Knowing what you're doing, being able to communicate it to everybody else. The same thing on the back end. So if the linebackers are a problem, and then your secondary, like you pointed out, is a problem, it's like, man, with a new defensive coordinator coming in.
I also think their linebackers are going to be fine in the new system. I think that's going to take some of that burden off of them, is just to kind of let them line up.
Yeah, they're far more athletic than they were last year.
Just line up and let them run.
They were big and slow. They were big and slow last year.
Yeah, I think their linebackers are going to be pretty good. Louisville defensive end, I think that's fair. That's fair. Their offensive line is also another one that I would consider, because they lost some guys from last year. Texas A&M wide receiver, to a degree, I think that's fair. I also worry about their, how good is their D-line going to be with some of the guys they lost. I think that's a fair question. But I'm okay with receiver. I think they're really solid on the O-line. You know who their quarterback is. They're loaded at running back. Tight end is I might actually go tight end for them, even more so than receiver. Secondary should be solid. Your linebackers, you're going to be good there. Your D-lines, could be solid, but there's still at least enough question marks. So I'd go tight end or D-line before I would go wide receiver for them. That's just my 2 cents, Shaun. Ole Miss quarterback, we talked about that before. That's not a question mark. And then Oklahoma tight end, again, I didn't realize Oklahoma was like that loaded, that like their tight end room is their biggest question mark on that team.
It's weird, right?
Yeah. I know, right? I mean, look, I'm sorry. Until their offensive line proves they can block someone, that is still by far their biggest concern. By far. I don't care. Look, man, Notre Dame won 10 games in 2017 with their starting tight end catching 9 passes. Okay? Like, you can be okay without a productive tight end. Last I checked, Shaun, it's pretty hard to win football games. Just kind of.
Yeah.
And I feel like the world is like kind of living in like this fantasy land of convincing themselves that this is the Oklahoma O-line of 5 years ago. And it's not. It's just not. So that's still by far their biggest question mark for me is the O-line. So that's it, Shaun. I thought overall, I thought this was a fair, there's only a couple that I looked at. I was like, what? By the most part, you could kind of understand everyone. I thought overall is a pretty good list. All right, guys, we're going to move on to topic number 3 today here in a second. But before we do, just ask that you all do us a little favor. It's that little thumbs up button right underneath Shaun. I think it might be underneath me. Go ahead and hit that for us. We'd appreciate that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you can always be reminded when we're going to do shows. And, of course, as always, make sure you check out the message board where you can get all of our premium content at boards.irishbreakdown.com.